Welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to continue our study on solving quadratic equations. And today we're going to look at a process called completing the square. And what we want to do is we're going to be given a quadratic equation and we want to find a value of c such that that value of c makes the left-hand side of our equation a perfect square trinomial. So let's take a look at an example. Here we have x squared plus 14x equal to 15. And I want to solve for x by completing the square. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to rewrite our equation. And we're going to leave a little room in between the value of b and the equal sign. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the value of b. In this case, our value of b here is 14. And we're going to take b and divide it by 2, which gives us 7, and then we're going to square that value of b divided by 2. And so we get 49. Okay, and so this value of 49 will make the left-hand side of our equation a perfect square trinomial. One thing to remember, in order for our quadratic to be a perfect square trinomial, a and c must be perfect squares, and b must be equal to 2 times the square root of a times the square root of c. And so in this case it is, the square root of c is 7, and then 2 times 7 is 14, which gives us our value of b. Okay, now that we found the value of c that makes the left-hand side of the equation a perfect square, remember, whenever we're dealing with equations, whatever we do to the left-hand side, we must also do to the right-hand side. So because I added that value of c to the left-hand side, I must also add it to the right-hand side as well. Okay, and now I'm just going to simply collect like terms on the right-hand side. So I get x squared plus 14x plus 49 is equal to 64. And now I'm going to factor the left-hand side. So when I factor, I get x plus 7 squared. Okay, and that's equal to 64. And now we've seen how to solve quadratics that involve square roots. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, and so on the left-hand side, I get x plus 7. And on the right-hand side, I need the square root of 64, which remember we must always write plus or minus and whatever the square root is. So here in this case, it's going to be plus or minus 8. And so now I want to separate into my two cases because we expect two solutions for each quadratic. So I'm going to have x plus 7 equal to positive 8 and x plus 7 equal to negative 8. Okay, so when I solve the first linear equation, I get x equal to 1. And when I solve the second linear equation, I get x equal to negative 15. Okay, so here, the solution for our quadratic by completing the square is going to be negative 15 or 1, and we write that in set notation. Okay, let's look at one last example. So here I have Linux Academy is planning to move to a new building that has an area of 2,816 square feet. The building has a rectangular shape in which the length is 20 feet longer than the width. And I want to find the dimensions of the new building. Okay, so let's fill in what we know from our word problem. So we know that we have a rectangular shape, and we know that the length is 20 feet longer than the width. Okay, so remember, you can use whatever variable you would like. Here I'm going to just use w for width. And so my length, L, is going to be 20 plus w, or w plus 20. Okay, and I want to find the dimensions according to these expressions that we have set up. So I'm going to use my area formula for a rectangle, which is length times width. And I know my area. My area is 2816 square feet. And my length is 20 plus w. And my width is simply w. And so I have 2816 is equal to 20w plus w squared. Okay, and so now I want to find my dimensions by completing the square. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take half of b. So in this case, b is 20, and half of b would be 10, and then I'm going to square it. And so if I square 10, I get 100. And so my value of c is going to be 100, so I get 100 plus 20w plus w squared. And so I must also add it to the left hand side in this case. So I'm going to get 2916. Okay, and so when I factor the right hand side, I get w plus 10 squared. And on the left hand side, I get 2916. Okay, and so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, and so this is going to give me w plus 10, and the square root of 2916 is going to be the square root of 2916 is going to be 54. So I get plus or minus 54 on the left-hand side. And so I separate into my two cases. So I get w plus 10 is equal to positive 54, and w plus 10 is equal to negative 54. And so when I solve on the left-hand side, the first linear equation, I get w is 44. And when I solve on this side, I get w is negative 64. And so remember, we must always put our units. So in this case, our units are feet. So we get the width is either 44 feet or the width is negative 64 feet. Now, because we're dealing with a distance, we cannot use a negative distance, so we disregard the negative 64 feet. So our width in this case is going to be 44 feet. So here we can say that the width is 44 feet. And our length is going to be 20 more than that, which will give us 64 feet. Okay, and so we found the dimensions of the new building that we want, that has an area of 2,816 square feet. Okay, and that is the end of today's lesson.